What if a single act of kindness sparked a ripple so powerful it filled 12 graves by sunrise? This is the story of a rancher who broke bread with a dying boy and woke up to a miracle that changed his land, his legacy, and the entire valley. Don't underestimate quiet generosity, because sometimes it's the smallest deed that echoes across generations. If stories like this move you, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us, because when compassion sets the stage, legend often follows. Dust clung to the air like an unwelcome guest, lingering in every sun-baked corner of Jensen's Ridge Ranch. It was late August, the kind of day where the heat made the horizon quiver, and ranch hands hurried from shade to shade like sparrows avoiding hawks. In that dry quiet lived Tom Jensen, the owner, early 60s, salt and pepper beard, work-worn hands that knew every fence post, every gate latch, every ridge where trouble might rise with the wind. He wasn't a storyteller, not in the way legends are born. He spoke simple truths. The land responds to what you feed it, not what you fantasize. And kindness, he believed, carried weight even if no one saw it. Everything changed one evening at dusk. Tom had been done for the day. The cattle were in. The horses snoozed near the barn. He'd just finished a pot of thick corn soup enough to fill his belly and a deep bone ache, and sat on the porch rail, chewing quietly when he spotted the boy. He was curled against the fence, no more than 10, clothes ragged, skin pale under the evening light, backpack at his side, barefoot. Somewhere around him, the smell of wild sage and desperation hung heavy. Instinct tugged at Tom to keep walking, to mind his own business, but dinner felt suddenly inadequate. He crossed the porch and walked toward the boy with the soup bowl cradled in his hand. "Here," he said gently, offering half the soup. "You hungry?" The boy looked up, mouth opening in surprise. He accepted the bowl with hands too small for such a gift. "I'm dying," he whispered, voice thin. Tom hesitated, then tossed him a towel to clean his face. "Maybe, but you're here now. You deserve dinner." They didn't speak much as the boy ate. Tom warmed water on the wood stove and refilled the bowl with fresh soup. He handed him bread-thick, crusty slices ripped from his lunch stash and watched the boy's hunger quiet him into slow breaths. Tom introduced himself. "Name's Tom. What about you?" The boy sighed, swallowing. "Samuel." Then, "I'm sick. I was trying to walk back home before I crashed. Ended up here." Tom nodded calmly, looked across the ridge into fading light. "You should come inside. I'll figure it out." So Samuel followed. Inside, he settled on the couch, bundled in a blanket. Tom brought water, fed him more soup, and called his wife to check on blankets and change of clothes. He didn't make grand promises, didn't talk about miracles, just, "You rest, I'll help." Samuel slept before midnight. Meanwhile, subplot 1 cracks open across town with Nurse Rosa, the clinic's longtime director. She got Tom's evening call asking for help. She drove out with a dusty medical bag, greeting Tom with professional warmth and concern. "You found him walking the road?" she asked calmly, setting up oxygen and checking vitals. Tom nodded. "My house is nearby. Thought it better than the ditch." Rosa studied Samuel and frowned, not out of fear but respect. She knew the boy's condition was bad: congenital heart issues, dehydration, fatigue. She'd seen trouble like this before, but out on the ranch at dusk. That was new terrain for her. She administered fluids and medication. She left after midnight, but not before Tom asked, "He's alone?" Rosa's eyes narrowed. "From what I heard, yes. I'll check clinic files and call you if we find next of kin." "Okay," he said. "Thanks." Days passed. Samuel stayed. He asked nothing about home or taxes. He ate soup and rested, and Tom checked matches his watch medicine, rest, bread, water. No lectures, no pity. As Samuel got stronger, he talked softly about his father, gone months earlier, about his mother's illness, about being shuffled between relatives, not treated well, and slipping away without notice. About how nobody had ever asked how he felt until Tom did. Subplot 2 enters. Tom's daughter, Elise, came from the nearest town school on Sunday afternoon, bearing groceries and fresh apples. She saw Samuel, pale but seated upright, holding a slice of bread. She hesitated, eyes shifting between father and boy, then offered a monkey puppet and sat, quirking questions about video games and school. Samuel smiled softly, a real smile, and talked about math he liked, but kids his age at school didn't. She stayed late, and as she left, she hugged Samuel, gently looked at her father, and nodded unspoken. He belongs here. That night, Tom couldn't break his sleep before midnight. He got up and checked Samuel's room. He sat quietly beside the boy's cot and said, "You know, when we share bread, we share more than food." Samuel listened. Tom kept talking, not preaching, just warmth and presence, until both their breaths cinched with the hush of midnight. Wind. He fell asleep in a chair. Next dawn, Tom woke to Rosa's call. "There's a family in town looking for him," she said. "But there's something else." "At the cemetery." Tom frowned. "When we checked the records," Rosa continued, "the plot they wanted to assign Samuel was already filled 12 graves marked as unknown child, roughly around his age, from that same region. Unclaimed bodies buried over the years. Family said they'd come to retrieve a body for identification. Now it reads Samuel has revived, and they refused the cemetery exhumation. They say the grave belongs to a child who hasn't died yet." Tom felt the morning fog shift around him. Rosa's voice softened. "Some families called it a miracle." Tom stared at the sunrise, golden and delicate, and didn't know how to respond. He just whispered, "I shared my bread." By midday, word had spread in hushed reverence through town. 12 graves overturned by dawn, a starving boy restored. A rancher's kindness echoing where doubt once lived. Subplot 3, Mayor Carter visited the ranch late that afternoon. Tom offered lemonade on the porch. The mayor sat stiffly in plain clothes. "You fed a boy nobody knew," he said. "And now 12 graves ... empty." Tom nodded. "I shared what I had. Didn't expect anything." "You might just be the reason this valley still believes in hope," the mayor replied. "We'd like to hold a service and plant memorial trees for each unnamed grave. Would you mind?" Tom looked toward Samuel resting inside. Nodded. Double quotes good. Carter said, "Then let's do it together." When evening came, Tom sat quietly watching Samuel sleep. He thought of Elise's kind nod, Rosa's worry, the mayor's strange reverence, and the graves that belonged to kids who had names he didn't know until now. He realized then that kindness is a bridge, not a transaction. That sometimes saving one life redraws the map of an entire community. The boy belonged, and the graves belonged to no longer empty markers, but reminders of what a simple loaf of bread can restart. Dusk settled over the ranch. Crickets sang. Somewhere beyond the pasture fence, coyotes called back. And a boy asleep in a small bedroom cot dreamt dreams fueled by care, because fate isn't always cruel. Sometimes it's just looking for the next hand, one willing to feed another. Morning mist lingered over the pasture as Tom Jensen poured coffee on his porch, watching sunlight roll across the ridges, the kind of light that felt both forgiving and honest. He'd barely slept, memory of Samuel's breathing, the graves, and the mayor's speech circling in his mind. But as dusk had healed wounds, dawn now offered clarity. Inside, Samuel stirred, hungry again. Tom tucked the blanket under his arm and whisked him off to the kitchen where Elise had already baked apple muffins, filling the ranch house with warmth. Their daughter moved with careful purpose, savoring each successful batch, a quiet miracle in itself, and greeted her father with a hopeful nod. She didn't ask for explanations or any ownership of the miracle. She simply offered service and faith. At that moment, Tom felt the scale of it. Kindness grows best in silence. Rosa the nurse arrived mid-morning, cheerful but businesslike. She checked Samuel's vitals again and confirmed he was stronger. The boy sat on a stool, eating rather than regaining consciousness in fits and coughs. In conversation, she didn't hide her astonishment. She gently teared up when Tom mentioned the 12 graves names that were never assigned, now awaiting markers. "How did you know he needed help?" she asked, glancing at the ridge. "He was on the road," Tom replied, voice quiet. "He needed food and shade. That was enough." Rosa nodded, processing. "Karma doesn't usually send you the right person. You were home at the perfect moment." He frowned. "Just happened." She studied Samuel's chart, approved another 4 with less dosage, and murmured, "Just happened sometimes looks a lot like grace." When she packed up to leave, she paused at the doorway. "Don't let him vanish again. Know that this," she gestured at Samuel, "changed people more than they'll ever say." Across town, the mayor's plan accelerated. The funeral service for the unnamed children was scheduled by week's end. A local arborist offered 12 young oak trees, 1 for each grave. Villagers volunteered to help plant them. County records were updated. The graves would remain filled but now bear a plaque reading, "Unknown Child Rescued." Tom attended the planning meeting in the old town hall, watching its worn wood floors, faces aged by dust storms and drought, not hopeful. But as he spoke, people listened, not to theology, but to honesty. He offered no sermon, only what he'd done and what the land had witnessed. Subplot 2 deepened as neighbors approached, sharing stories of loved ones lost young. Women remembered childhood friends who'd vanished without record. Men recalled small tragedies hushed by shame. Tom nodded, never speaking for them. Eventually, they asked if more stones should bear names. "If you'd been a little later," one woman whispered. Tom placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then I'd already be burying Samuel." Silence followed, heavy and grateful. Meanwhile, Samuel's condition improved steadily. Tom paired him with Elise's spare books, and they began lessons in orthography and math. Tom didn't interrupt. He watched Samuel's quiet smile return, the way light moved across the boy's face when he solved the long addition problem. One afternoon, Sam leaned in and said softly, "I'd still go home, one day." Tom nodded, unsure who had told him so, but he understood. He asked Rosa to keep trying to locate family, though hope dimmed around identification. Subplot 3 opened in the afternoon when local reporter Gina knocked on the porch, recorder in hand. The story had gone viral: rescue of a dying boy, filled graves, a rancher's meal. But she asked more. "Why you kept him at odds with your business?" Tom explained sheepishly. His cattle sold next week. Grain shipments delayed, but he never missed a feeding. He showed her the ledger, donations sent to the cemetery to maintain the graves. No headline claims, just receipts. Gina left with tears unannounced. A quiet profile ran, praising Tom's humility rather than sensationalizing the graves. The article included a photo of him and Sam planting one of the oaks. It ended, "Kindness changes the soil of our stories." Late that week, Harland, the county sheriff, paid a visit. Quiet man, calm voice, steady boots. He brought news. A woman had come forward claiming Samuel was her nephew, abandoned in a hospital years earlier after a doctor's strike. She'd recognized him from Gina's article. DNA showed a match. He'd have a home at last. Tom's chest both warmed and closed at the news. He didn't say much, but he gave Sam the sweater he'd borrowed, helped pack toiletries, and walked him to the truck. When Sam hugged him, and Tom dared to cry, it was neither grief nor joy, but sheer ache, letting go of someone who'd changed his life yet never truly belonged. He kissed Sam's forehead and promised, "You're always part of this ridge." Evening fell soft. Tom walked Elise and the oak seedlings down to the cemetery, where 12 saplings reached skyward next to headstones both old and new. The solo graves remained aghast of mystery. A gentle wind rustled the leaves. Elise held a small plaque, Unknown child, beloved. Tom placed it by one young sapling. The rose glowed golden. The small funeral crowd watched, silent with understanding. Mayor Carter placed one final shovel of earth. "Here lies compassion," he said quietly, "and here it grows." After planting, Tom drove home under a sky of brilliance. Back at the house, he sat on the porch, eyes soft on distant land. He realized that grace sometimes doesn't return what you gave, but nurtures something stronger than you ever imagined. In the week that followed, Jenna the nurse Rosa sent word that the woman had withdrawn guardianship. Samuel needed time. Rosa asked Tom to consider hosting Sam for summer school. Tom agreed, not out of charity but out of kinship. The family drove back. Sam waved goodbye to Tom at the highway bend, not tearful but grateful. That afternoon, Tom sat with Elise in the house he'd once believed about legacy of land. They drank tea and watched the ridge breathe. "He'll visit," Elise said. Tom nodded. "Maybe next August." He looked at the horizon again, where 12 oaks stood guard over graves that once carried silence. Now they held names, shade, memory. That night, he wrote the beginning of a letter to Sam. No lecture or legacy passed on, just, "Remember these oaks. They needed you as much as you needed them." He carried the letter with him whenever he rode out. But tonight, he left it on the desk, sealed and unaddressed, for another day. He leaned back and closed his eyes. The ridge whispered across time. Life, given freely, had a way of restoring more than life itself. Summer dawned bright over Jensen's ridge, the hills warming slowly, gold and soft beneath the sun's early rays. Tom Jensen watched the ridge from his porch each morning, hands wrapped around a cool mug, marveling not at the beauty, but at the quiet second acts each new day offered. He remembered how this ridge once seemed dull and unforgiving, a witness to hardship and dust. Now, with 12 oaks planted across the cemetery slope, fence lines brighter green, and even small wildflowers pushing through cracked earth, those acts of kindness seemed to have awakened something deeper. Samuel visited that weekend with his aunt, a fragile child now sturdier, cheeks fuller, curiosity bright behind glasses. He came alone the first time, but Tom insisted Elise host him for an overnight stay. Under her bedside lamp, she tucked him in, safe here, not just in a house, but in legacy. He whispered bedtime thanks. She smirked at Tom over the lamp. "Looks like a guest room has become a home," she teased. Subplot 1 returns as community life shifts around Tom. Townsfolk began walking the cemetery slope at golden hour, pausing by the new saplings with hands folded softly. The mayor, inspired by the story, ensured yearly memorial services, not as ceremonies, but as reminders of obligation to compassion. When he met Tom at one of these gatherings, he said quietly, "You didn't start something for gratitude. You rooted awareness." Tom nodded, wasn't expecting anything. The mayor smiled, looking across the rows of markers. "That's what makes it worth remembering." Subplot 2 deepens when Rosa the nurse returns one morning to perform a checkup on Samuel, who's now chatted into health. She walked past Tom's house for a moment before speaking. "You're responsible for more than a meal. You're giving him a childhood." Tom felt that truth echo louder than any sermon. In her soft insistence, he recognized not obligation, but possibility. Meanwhile, mother and aunt expressed gratitude, but equally insisted Samuel's time with Tom reshape who he chose to become. That weekend, Tom surprised Sam with a calf to bottle feed, a quiet gesture. Sam asked if he could bring it next spring. Tom nodded. "It'll need you as much as you need it." A third subplot unfolds with Gabe, one of Tom's ranch hands. Gabe had been present during the early illness, broader shoulders stooped ever since. One evening, he approached Tom by the fence. "I saw the story," he started. "Inspired me to start an evening soup run for the hard-offs, those who work long before their breakfast. Might be small, but—" His voice trailed. Tom placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's good work." He watched Gabe stand taller, purpose reshaped by witnessing mercy in action. That gesture seemed to close unwritten paragraphs about class, empathy, service. Samuel returned regularly that summer, now riding at the back of Tom's horse across the corrals. He learned to fence posts and hold a halter. Tom watched the boy's laugh clear and undying as he chased chickens clucking through hay bales. It reminded him how easily joy can grow, even where sorrow once lay. He asked Sam one afternoon, "What do you want to be now?" Samuel paused, then answered, "Someone who helps people." Tom nodded, and later he framed it as the future. Tom hoped he'd helped build a little garden of generosity planted with shared bread. As autumn approached, Tom's cattle sold well-grain flush, markets stable, and he quietly donated a portion to fund scholarships for children from the valley whose families once went unburied in the cemetery. He didn't announce it, just asked Deerbank to prefix each check, "For remembrance, for hope." When the bank manager insisted on naming the scholarship, Tom refused. "Let memory run quietly," he said. Now the final act nears. In late autumn, Samuel arrived again, this time to deliver an envelope. Inside, an acceptance letter to study veterinary science, full scholarship to the State Agricultural College. Handwritten note, "I want to help animals, like you helped me." Tom took a breath he didn't know he needed. It echoed across the ridge. That evening, Tom and his wife poured cider in front of the hearth. Elise read aloud Samuel's letter. The flame flickered shadows across aging beams, brightening the room with edges of redemption. Weeks later, the town gathered at the cemetery edge once again. 12 oaks stood taller, now branches fuller, leaves a flush of gold as community folk and farming families came to name the graves alongside Samuel. 11 were given names. The 12th remained, the unknown child rescued, a marker acknowledging everyone who slipped through cracks. They scribed names from historical records where known: children born in summer plague, toddlers lost in storms, infants claimed by drought. Samuel spoke their names softly, one by one. Lisa the nurse recording each as memory restored. Tom watched, chest tight, tears unbidden. The proclamations weren't grand. No PR cameras, no speeches. Just families lighting candles, photographs pinned to fences, prayers not for fame, but for belonging. Returning the next morning, Tom jogged a half-mile down a trail he previously avoided. He stood under the first oak planted and paused. Faded scars across bark, but strong after a year. He traced its trunk gently and whispered a simple prayer. "Thank you for letting me share bread, even when I barely had enough to feed myself." Life resumed under the familiar rhythm of seasons, but deeper now. Samuel went off to college, visiting holidays. Tom taught him calf raising, fence fixing, prayer before storms. Gabe continued soup runs, teaching empathy learned from Tom's kindness. Rosa expanded the health clinic's outreach program for hill regions. Maya penning articles about the miracle road one, how one meal changed a valley, where she quoted Tom. It wasn't about saving one boy, it was about saving all the ones no one ever noticed. One final anecdote. That spring, Tom stopped at Kinder's General Store. As he paid for feed, the clerk smiled and wrote Tom and Sam Jensen on her list of donors. Overhearing, a neighbor asked, "Your family still giving?" Tom just ruffled his daughter's hair, where Sam trailed behind by her side, sleeves rolled, asking about spring planting. He replied quietly, "We never stop." The valley grew brighter, slower, kinder in the wake of one shared bowl of bread. 12 graves once marked stories that splintered. Now they held names in shade and tribute. Winter arrived like a soft breath over Jensen's ridge, blanketing fields in silence and softening the edges of time. The oaks planted at the cemetery's edge now stood tall and firm, their branches dusted with frost, recalling earlier moments of hope. Tom Jensen watched them one early morning, snow crunching beneath boots, coffee still warm in his hand, as he reflected on a summer that changed everything. He didn't feel proud, just grateful. It had been a year since Samuel first stumbled onto his porch, starving and fading. Since then, Sam had gone off to college to study veterinary medicine on full scholarship built from his ashes. Still, he came home nearly every season, each visit filled with gentle surprise and deeper conversation. He'd return from campus, lean into the barn door, and say, "Guess who got assigned horse therapy rotation?" Tom ruffled his hair and nodded, not surprised, but infinitely proud. One spring afternoon, Sam showed up with a tall stack of letters, handwritten thank yous, from families who had adopted rescue animals rescued through Tom's ranch vet clinic outreach. He'd started a small program to pair orphaned animals with orphaned volunteers who lost children long ago, kind of reciprocity he said the ridge needed. Tom listened, feeling the weight of something sacred take root. He said quietly, "I taught you kindness. You turned it into connection." Across town, Rosa the nurse organized a small clinic fundraiser to cover heat and blanket supplies for rural families. She approached Tom to plant seedlings as part of the event, part ritual, part community pledge. They planted an 11th oak tree alongside the cemetery's original dozen, then names matched by cloth-labeled tags: hope, healing, memory, kindness. Baylor County officials appeared for photographs, but Tom leaned gray-head humble at the back, watching the shifting of hearts as neighbors embraced each other. Gabe helped run the soup partnership, and on this warm afternoon, he slipped Tom a cup, black coffee, not sweet. Gabe said simply, "You changed the way folks think." "Keeps me going." Tom swallowed in warmth and nodded. Elise found her father in the barn at twilight as winter light faded. Sam had given his father a small journal, a collection of stories from ranch visitors, volunteers, and former skeptics, everyone who had knelt at the graves or tasted soup or helped plant trees. Each entry shared a small statement of gratitude or humility. Elise handed the journal to Tom. On the page for her own father, she'd written, "Dad taught me to look beyond pride and to honor unseen lives." Tom's chest filled. No words came. Only memory of forging compassion into the soil. At the anniversary gathering 1 year, exactly after Sam's arrival, townspeople returned to the cemetery. 12 oaks now cast shape over 12 graves. Each grave had a known name now except for one, the unknown child rescued. And beside each marker stood a signed photo of Sam as he had grown through the months, healthy, kind, real. Families placed lanterns and laid flowers, but no speeches rose above prayer or memory. Sam read names aloud in the hush. A single violin floated through the gathering, the mountain musician who once chronicled storms now playing something hopeful. Straw tractors left its smoke in the distance. Neighbors crossed hands over saddles. Farmers offered plow help. And Tom stood quietly beside his daughter, shoulders relaxed, spirit lit by the ripple that kindness carved into earth. The press didn't flood the ridge this time. There were no reporter cameras or banner headlines, just a single cameraman from a regional news channel taking air shots of the dozen oaks tonight, aerial banners reading, "A rancher's bread renewed the valley's memory." The segment that aired captured Sam teaching a neighborhood child to saddle a pony and Tom pointing the way. No narration save for a simple tag, "Small deeds grow big roots." Ever after that, the story lived quieter, narrated in sharing fields, memory circles, and prayer. Months rolled into next autumn, and Tom packed jars of jam made with apples gifted by families from the fundraiser, not for sale, but for nourishment and kinship. One late afternoon, Mayor Carter knocked on the porch with a visitor in tow, a power company exec in green logo. He wanted permission to provide solar lighting along the cemetery walkways, free of charge. Tom listened, then saw Sam Neill helping. The exec buckle straps on LED lanterns along oak trunks. The exec asked, smiling, "Ever need help powering more lights?" Sam joined in, arms steady. Tom only nodded. He didn't need to speak. The offer was affirmation of silent work stretching. Beyond fields. The exec left with plans humming. That night, Tom walked beside 12 glowing lamps under oaks in the field trees, no longer fragile but steady, lit by solar cells humming softly. Under that canopy, A gathering had formed. Neighbors, ranch workers, family friends, Sam's aunt, even the nurse Rosa. They shared pie and cider, and the ridge felt like home. Tom looked around at faces not altered by time, but shaped by witness. He reached into his pocket and pulled the letter he once wrote to Sam untouched since he sealed it. He pushed it across a table and said, "Read this next time you visit." Sam took it with hands steady, blinking as if trapped between recognition and gratitude. Tom tipped his hat and walked off into dusk. On the drive home, wind brushed grasses as Tom stopped near the cemetery gate in twilight. Frost frosted the road. He closed his eyes and breathed slow as prayer. Kindness doesn't end with one act, he thought. It echoes, it roots. It rises again through every hand that plants it forward. 12 graves full, one barn still open. One boy he didn't expect became a son of this land. One ranch a beacon, not of power, but of presence, and sunset spilled golden across ridges that once seemed barren. Because sometimes sharing a bowl changes more than one life, it changes a whole valley.